Elias Ward had lived on the plains for more than 20 years. His ranch was small, but it stretched over rolling hills and open fields where cattle grazed freely. Life here was quiet and predictable, the kind of life most people never understood. He rose with the sun, tended his herd, repaired fences, and occasionally rode into the nearby town for supplies. He liked the simplicity of it, the open sky, the soft wind, the sound of cattle moving in the morning mist. It was a life of work, solitude, and small moments of peace. One late autumn evening, when the wind carried the chill of approaching winter, Elias was riding along the rocky valley behind his ranch. He checked his cattle as usual, moving slowly through narrow passes where the cliffs rose sharply on either side. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the last warmth of the sun sank beneath the horizon. He loved these quiet rides. It's the kind where only the wind and the occasional bird broke the silence. But tonight, the peace was broken by a faint, desperate cry. At first, he thought it might be an animal. Wolves sometimes traveled through the valley, and sometimes a lost calf would call for its mother. But this sound was different, human, urgent, and fearful. Elias paused, letting his horse sniff the air and listening carefully. There it was again, a small, shaky voice calling for help. His heart quickened, but he did not panic. Elias had seen enough danger in his life to remain calm when he needed to. He spurred his horse forward gently, following the voice. The rocky path narrowed, the cliffs on both sides looming like silent watchers. The cry came again, this time closer, sharper. Finally, at the edge of a narrow canyon, Elias saw her. She was a young Apache woman, her dark hair tangled, clothes dusted with dirt and blood from scratches. She was trapped between the rocks, unable to move, her legs pinned beneath a small slide of loose stones. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. Elias could see the trembling in her hands as she tried to lift the stones herself. "Easy," Elias called softly, keeping his distance. "I won't hurt you." The woman froze and stared at him. He saw the suspicion in her eyes, the cautious pull backward as she tried to shift further under the rocks. In that moment, Elias understood. She had every reason to be wary of strangers. In many towns and settlements, people had treated her people unfairly, even cruelly. And here, alone in the canyon, she had no way to know if this man was a friend or a threat. "My name is Elias," he said gently, sitting his horse a little way off. "I'm here to help." The woman's lips parted, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Why?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because I can. And because no one should be left like this." She hesitated. The wind swept through the canyon, cold and biting, and she shivered despite herself. Elias dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. He examined the stones that trapped her and realized that moving them by hand would be nearly impossible. They were heavy, loose, and dangerous. "I'll need to get some tools," he said. "Rope, blankets, maybe a crowbar. I'll be back soon, I promise." She looked at him with cautious hope. Her voice was barely audible. "And if you don't come back?" "I will come back," he said firmly. "I promise." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. She had no other choice. She could wait and hope he meant what he said, or she could try again to free herself and risk serious injury. She chose to wait. Elias mounted his horse and rode back to the ranch through the chilling night. The moon rose high, silver and bright, casting long shadows across the plains. He worked quickly at the ranch, gathering the tools he needed: rope, crowbar, blankets, and a few supplies to keep her warm when he returned. Even in the quiet of the night, he felt a sense of urgency. He knew that every moment mattered. The next morning, the valley was misty and cold. Elias rode back to the canyon before sunrise. He could see her sitting against a rock, exhausted, her eyes alert and watching every movement. She had not tried to move the stones further, had not called for anyone else. She had waited, trusting his word. Elias dismounted, leaving his horse tied to a nearby tree. "Good morning," he said softly. "I brought what we need." She glanced at the tools and then back at him. Her expression softened just a little. She did not yet smile, but there was a hint of relief in her eyes. Together, carefully, they began the work. Elias showed her how to use the rope to help lift the smaller stones safely. She listened and followed his instructions, her fear slowly mingling with cautious trust. For hours they worked side by side. Elias spoke gently to her, telling her small, ordinary things about his cattle, the ranch, the animals they kept tanned. She began to respond, first with nods, then with words. "Name is Nayeli," she said quietly at one point. "Good to meet you, Nayeli," Elias replied. "We'll get you out soon." The hours passed slowly, the labor exhausting, but each small movement of stone brought a little more space for her to move. Elias admired her strength. Despite the fear, despite the cold and exhaustion, she had not given up. Her spirit was quiet but steady, and it made him respect her even more. By mid-morning, they had cleared enough of the rocks for her to crawl through carefully. She hesitated, looking back at him. Elias nodded encouragingly. "You can do it. I'm right here." Slowly, carefully, Nayeli pushed herself through the narrow opening. When she finally stood on her feet, Elias offered his coat. She wrapped it around herself, shivering, and accepted the small bottle of water he offered. "You kept your promise," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "I always keep my promises," Elias said. Smiling gently, they began the walk back toward his ranch. The sun had risen now, warm and bright, cutting through the morning mist. Nayeli stumbled a little, weak from the long hours trapped in the labor of moving stones. Elias steadied her, walking beside her. Along the trail, she slowly began to talk about how she had been collecting plants for healing when the rock slide struck. Her voice grew steadier as they walked. Elias listened, careful not to interrupt, careful to show that her words were valued. By the time they reached the ranch, she was tired but safe. Elias gave her a warm place to rest, food to regain her strength, and blankets to wrap herself in. He did not crowd her, did not push her to speak. He simply let her rest. Nayeli watched him work quietly around the ranch, tending the animals and preparing food. She noticed small, kind gestures, the way he checked on the horses, the way he arranged firewood carefully so it would burn well, the way he moved with calm certainty. She had been trapped and alone in fear. But now she saw that this man could be trusted. As evening approached, Elias made sure she had everything she needed for the night. He explained that at first light he would guide her safely back to her people. Nayeli nodded, her fear slowly giving way to gratitude and respect. In this vast, lonely land, she had found a person who cared without asking for anything in return, and for Elias, it was enough to see her safe, to know that he had done the right thing. He had come across many challenges in his life, but helping someone in need, offering protection and kindness when no one else could, felt like the truest measure of who he was. As night fell, the stars stretched across the sky, and the valley was quiet once again. Elias looked out at the plains, feeling the calm that came after action. Nayeli rested, wrapped in warmth, and for the first time since the rock slide, she felt a sense of safety. In a land full of dangers and uncertainty, this small moment of trust and care became a quiet miracle. Elias knew the next day would bring new challenges, guiding her safely home, returning her to her people, and ensuring no harm came to her. But for now, they could rest. And that rest, earned through patience, courage, and care, was a beginning of trust, of respect, and perhaps a small spark of hope that in this world, good people still existed. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, spilling golden light across Elias Ward's ranch. The wind carried a crisp chill that hinted at the coming winter. Nayeli stirred under the warm blankets, her body aching from the long hours trapped in the canyon. She had slept fitfully, dreams mixed with fear and relief, but she awoke to find herself safe, alive, and cared for. For the first time since the rock slide, she felt a small sense of peace. Elias entered the room carrying a basket of warm food and fresh water. His boots made soft thuds against the wooden floor. "Good morning," he said gently, placing the basket on the table. "You slept well?" Nayeli shook her head slightly. then smiled faintly. "Better than I thought I would," she admitted. Her voice was quiet, but steady. She had been cautious around him since the day before, but now she felt a growing trust in his presence. "I'm glad," Elias said, seating himself nearby. "We have a lot to do today, but first, you need to eat and regain your strength." She nodded, accepting a small piece of bread and water. Elias watched her carefully, making sure she ate enough, but not pushing her. He understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned, especially after fear and danger. Once she had eaten, he spoke about the plan. "We'll go back to the canyon. There are still stones blocking your path, and I want to make sure everything is safe for you to move freely. After that, we'll ride together toward your camp." Nayeli listened, her eyes alert. "I do not need to be carried?" she asked. She was proud of her independence, even after the frightening events. "No," Elias replied kindly. "I'll be with you, step by step. You'll manage, and I'll help where it's needed." They prepared for the journey, Elias gathering his rope, tools, and a few extra supplies. Nayeli dressed carefully, pulling her worn shawl around her shoulders, and tied her hair back. The day was bright, though the air was cold, and Elias could see her shivering slightly from the chill. He handed her a thick blanket to wrap around herself. "This will help until the sun warms you fully," he said. Together, they rode toward the canyon. Elias noticed how carefully she mounted her horse, her movements precise and controlled despite her fatigue. He admired her strength. She was small, but her presence was steady, determined. Even after the terror of the rock slide, she had maintained a quiet courage. When they reached the canyon, the damage from the slide was clear. Large stones and boulders had shifted and blocked the path, creating a dangerous barrier. Elias dismounted first, moving slowly among the rocks to assess the situation. Nayeli followed cautiously, her eyes wide as she remembered how trapped she had been the day before. "We'll clear a safe path first," Elias said. "I need you to guide me to where the stones are most dangerous. Then we'll remove them carefully, one at a time." Nayeli nodded. She stepped forward and pointed to a cluster of rocks near the edge. "Here," she said softly. "This one trapped me the most. Be careful, there are loose pieces around it." Elias worked slowly and methodically, using his crowbar and ropes to shift the stones. He explained each movement to Nayeli, making sure she understood and could help without putting herself at risk. She followed his instructions, holding ropes and stabilizing smaller stones as he pried larger ones free. Hours passed and the morning sun climbed higher. The work was hard, physically demanding, but neither of them complained. Nayeli marveled at Elias's skill and patience. He did not rush. He treated each stone with care, each movement deliberate, ensuring that nothing would shift unexpectedly. She began to trust him more with every careful action. During breaks, he sat on nearby rocks, catching their breath and sharing small stories. Elias spoke about the ranch, his daily routines, and the cattle he tended. Nayeli listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes asking questions. Then she shared stories of her own life, how she had learned to gather herbs, how she knew which plants healed and which were dangerous, and how she had survived alone in the wilderness. Elias listened without judgment, only admiration. He could see that her life had not been easy, yet she carried herself with dignity and resilience. "You have a strong spirit," he said gently. "Many would have given up in that canyon." Nayeli's eyes softened, and she whispered, "I did not give up. Not yet." As the sun rose higher, their efforts began to show progress. A clear path opened slowly among the stones. Nayeli took careful steps, testing the stability of the ground, while Elias guided her and moved the remaining obstacles. Every movement was calculated, every shift deliberate, but slowly. The canyon's path was cleared. Finally, after hours of work, the largest stone, the one that had trapped Nayeli most, was shifted enough for her to move freely. Elias extended his hand to her. "Ready?" he asked. Nayeli hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his. She trusted him, but the memory of fear was still fresh. Elias's grip was firm, but gentle, steadying her as she carefully stepped over the remaining stones. When she stood fully upright on safe ground, she let out a small sigh of relief. "You did it," Elias said, smiling. "We did it." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes bright with gratitude and disbelief. "You've kept your promise," she whispered. "You returned." "I always keep my promises," he replied simply. They took a moment to rest. Elias handed her water and a piece of bread. She accepted it, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself a small smile. The canyon that had felt like a prison now seemed a little less daunting, a little less frightening, because she had someone by her side who truly cared. Once they had regained their strength, Elias led Nayeli toward his ranch. She walked beside him, careful with every step, while he guided her and helped her over uneven ground. Along the trail, she began to speak more openly. She told him about the plants she had been collecting, the herbs her people used for healing, and the small, quiet knowledge she had learned from her elders. Elias listened intently, asking questions and showing interest, never interrupting, never rushing. By the time they reached the edge of the plains, Nahal's confidence had grown. She realized that Elias had risked his own comfort and safety just to help her. That gesture filled her with a mixture of gratitude and respect. She had encountered danger, fear, and uncertainty. Yet here she was, alive and unharmed, because one man had chosen to act with kindness and courage. When they arrived at the ranch, Elias led her to a warm room, prepared with blankets and a simple meal. He did not force conversation or demand gratitude. He only ensured she was comfortable, rested, and safe. Nayeli watched him quietly, observing the calm way he moved, the careful attention he gave to the animals and the ranch. She realized that this man's strength was not just in his muscles or skill, but in his patience, his gentleness, and his quiet courage. As evening fell, Elias built a small fire, the smoke curling gently into the night sky. He prepared supper, leaving her a warm plate and a cup of water. Nayeli ate quietly, savoring the warmth and comfort after the long day. For the first time since she had been trapped, she felt truly safe. After supper, Elias spoke quietly. "Tomorrow, we'll go back to your camp. I'll guide you safely, step by step. You'll be home before the sun sets." Nayeli nodded. She wanted to return to her people, but she also knew she could trust Elias to protect her. A small sense of relief and gratitude filled her heart. She realized that in the midst of danger and fear, she had found someone who acted without selfishness, someone who had risked his time, energy, and safety just to ensure she lived. As night deepened, Nayeli rested under warm blankets by the fire. The stars shone brightly above the plains, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. Elias watched the horizon, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had come to the canyon to help a person in need, and he had succeeded. The work was not yet complete. Guiding her back to her people would be the final step, but the hardest part, the part that required courage, patience, and care, had already been done. Nayeli drifted into a calm sleep, no longer tormented by fear, but comforted by the presence of someone who truly cared. Elias tended his ranch quietly, checking the animals, preparing tools, and making sure everything was ready for the journey ahead. In this vast, often harsh land, trust and courage could save lives. Both had been tested and proven in the canyon that day. The night was long, but it was peaceful. By morning, both Elias and Nayeli would face the next challenge together, the journey back to her camp. A journey that would test their growing trust, their courage, and their determination. But for now, as the fire crackled softly and the stars shone above, there was only safety, warmth, and a quiet hope for what tomorrow might bring. The first light of dawn stretched across the plains, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Elias Ward had been awake for some time, checking his horses, ensuring they were fed and ready for the day. The air was cold, crisp, and full of promise. Today, he would guide Nayeli back to her people. The journey would not be easy, but after the events of the past 2 days, he knew they could face it together. Nayeli stirred from her sleep, her eyes blinking against the early light. The warmth of the blankets had kept her comfortable through the night. Her body no longer ached as sharply as it had when she first arrived. She felt a quiet courage settle in her chest, a sense that she was ready for the journey ahead. Elias entered the room carrying a small pack of supplies, water, bread, and a few herbs Nayeli had mentioned for healing small cuts or scrapes. "Good morning," he said softly. "We'll start soon. I have the horses ready, and the path back to your camp is clear, but it will be a long ride." Nayeli nodded, tying her hair back neatly and wrapping herself in a thick shawl. She approached the horses with a steady hand, checking the tack and ensuring everything was secure. Elias watched her silently, impressed by her careful attention and the quiet strength she displayed. Despite the fear and exhaustion of the past 2 days, she was composed, ready, and determined. They mounted their horses and began the ride. Elias stayed close, guiding Nayeli along the safest path, navigating the rocky terrain with practiced ease. The wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of grass, soil, and distant pine. Nayeli felt the chill, but it did not bother her as much as it had before. She had grown accustomed to the cold, and more importantly, she trusted Elias to protect her as they rode. Conversation flowed more freely than before. Nayeli spoke of her people, of the customs she had grown up with, and of the elders who had taught her to survive in the wilderness. She described the plants she collected, the ways they were used for healing, and the small wisdom passed down through generations. Elias listened intently, asking questions and showing genuine interest, never interrupting, never making assumptions. "You have a remarkable knowledge of the land," Elias said after a while, his voice warm. "Most people would not know what to do in the wild, but you can survive and thrive." Nayeli smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both pride and humility. "I learned from my family. We must know the land, respect it, or it will teach us harsh lessons." The journey continued for hours, the two of them riding side by side. The plains stretched endlessly, broken by small hills, clusters of trees, and winding streams. Nayeli's confidence grew with every step, every careful maneuver through the uneven ground. She realized that Elias's presence was steadying, his calm manner reassuring her that she could face challenges without fear. When they reached the edge of the forest that marked the beginning of the Apache settlement, Nayeli slowed her horse. Her heart quickened as she recognized familiar landmarks: the tall trees, the small clearing where she had camped before the rock slide, and the distant smoke rising from her people's fires. Elias noticed her hesitation and gently squeezed her arm. "We're almost there," he said softly. "Take your time. I'll stay with you." The first signs of the Apache elders appeared as they approached the settlement. Several men and women emerged from the small houses, their expressions a mixture of concern and relief. Nahel's people had been searching for her since she did not return the previous day. Fearing the worst, Nahel urged her horse forward slightly, and the elders recognized her immediately. "Nayeli," one of the women called, rushing forward. Others followed, surrounding her with careful protective gestures. The fear in their eyes gave way to joy as they realized she was unharmed. Elias dismounted, staying back slightly to allow Nahia's people to greet her. He could see the gratitude in her eyes, and he knew she was aware of his presence. Nayeli approached the elders, speaking quickly in her language, explaining how she had been trapped and how Elias had saved her. The elders turned to Elias with curiosity, then with cautious respect. "You helped her?" one of the men asked in broken English. Elias nodded simply. "She was in danger. I could not leave her there." There was a moment of silence. Then a small elder woman stepped forward. "You risked much for her," she said softly, her tone a mixture of wonder and approval. "Not many would do this without asking for reward." Elias shook his head. "I did what anyone should do. I saw someone in need and helped." The elders conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, they invited Elias to share a small meal with them, a gesture of respect and gratitude. He accepted, sitting among them on the soft grass, sharing bread, roasted meat, and water. Nayeli sat beside him, her eyes reflecting both relief and admiration. As they ate, Nayeli spoke again, this time more openly. "I feared I would never see my people again. I thought the canyon would be the end of me. But you came. You kept your promise?" You saved my life. Elias listened quietly, a calm smile on his face. It was the right thing to do. Anyone in my place would have acted the same. The elders nodded, their eyes meeting his with quiet acknowledgement. In that moment, Elias felt a deep respect for their traditions, their connection to the land, and the care they showed for one another. He realized that saving Nayeli was not just about moving stones or guiding her safely. It was about building trust, showing respect, and acting with honor. As the sun climbed higher, Elias prepared to leave. Nayeli stood beside him, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "Not just for saving me, but for respecting me, for treating me as a person, not a problem." Elias nodded humbly. "I only did what I should have." "Take care of yourself, Nayeli. Live well, and remember that kindness exists, even in hard times." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I will remember. And I will tell my people of the man who came when no one else could, who helped without asking for anything in return." Elias mounted his horse, giving her one last nod. He felt a quiet satisfaction in his heart, a sense of peace that comes from knowing he had acted rightly. The journey back to his ranch would be long, but it would be filled with the calm of duty fulfilled, of a life saved through courage and care as he rode away. Nayeli watched him disappear into the distance, her heart full of gratitude and hope. She knew she had survived more than a rock slide. She had survived fear and isolation, and she had encountered humanity at its finest. She would carry this memory with her forever, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, trust, courage, and kindness could prevail. By the time Elias returned to his ranch, the sun was high in the sky. He tended his animals, repaired fences, and prepared for the evening. But his thoughts often wandered to the young Apache woman whose life he had saved. He did not seek recognition or reward. Helping her was enough. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that in a world full of challenges, he had done what was right. Nayeli returned to her people, welcomed by the warmth of her family and the safety of her home. She shared the story of the cowboy who had saved her, not exaggerating or embellishing, but recounting every careful, courageous act. Her people listened, understanding the significance of his deeds, and for Nayeli, a bond of respect and gratitude was forged that would last her entire life. In the weeks that followed, Nayeli often thought of Elias, remembering the calm way he moved, the quiet patience in his voice, and the courage that had guided him to save her. She carried with her not just the memory of survival, but the lesson that kindness and bravery could appear when least expected. In a stranger who acted without fear or selfishness, Elias continued his quiet life on the plains, tending to his ranch, his animals, and his routines. Yet, in the back of his mind, he knew that the world was not just the land he saw each day, it was also the people he helped, the lives he touched through small acts of courage and care. Nayeli's survival was a testament to that truth, a story of hope and trust that would live in both their hearts forever. The plains remained quiet, the wind sweeping across the fields, the sun rising and setting in its usual rhythm. But for Elias and Nayeli, the memory of the canyon, the rescue, and the journey home would remain vivid, a proof that courage, kindness, and respect could change lives, even in the harshest of lands. And so, in the vast, often lonely expanse of the plains, two lives were forever changed, one by the rescue, the other by the gratitude and trust that followed. It was a story of survival, yes, but more importantly, it was a story of humanity, of the quiet strength found in simple acts of care, and the enduring bond that forms when one person chooses to help another without expectation, without hesitation, and with a heart full of courage.